I've asked Councilman Segmiller if he will lead us in invocation, and then could I ask Councilman Nyson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're here this evening as citizens and citizen representatives to discuss the business of Washington City and of the good people that live here. And we ask for thy blessing as we open this meeting. Help us that we might have clear minds as we consider the issues on the agenda tonight, that we may communicate respectfully, and that we might be able to perform our roles in a way that dignifies the community and the wonderful people that live here. We thank thee for the blessings we enjoy of having great neighbors and a beautiful corner of the earth to live in and recreate upon. We thank thee for all that we have, for our good health, and for the blessings that thou hast given us every day. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilman, for the prayer and the pledge. Before I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, I'd like to move item 7, if I may, right after item 4, after our consent agenda. That is the resolution.
Mayor, with that being said, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the agenda with the following change, that we move item 7 up following item 4, our consent agenda.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nyson, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Thank you very much. Item 2, announcements. Do we have anything to announce that we can film? Okay, if not, item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Anything to declare at this time? Okay, item 4, our consent agenda, consideration to approve the minutes from the city council meetings of 7/12/16 and 7/13/16. Any questions or comments about the minutes of those 2 meetings? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move approval of the minutes for 7/12 and 7/13 of 2016.
I have a motion and a second.
Granger, aye.
Segmiller, aye.
Nyson, aye.
Turek, aye.
Thank you. Those are approved. Item 7, move to after item 4, a consideration to approve a resolution naming the Veterans Park gazebo in honor of Quentin A. Nyson. We do have a resolution I'd like to read. Resolution naming the Veterans Park gazebo in honor of Quentin A. Nyson. Whereas Quentin A. Nyson has been a resident of Washington City for 97 years, with most of his time performing thousands of volunteer hours in community service. And whereas Quentin A. Nyson served as mayor of Washington City for 14 years, from 1950 to 1963. And whereas not only giving back to our community in community service, Quentin Nyson helped in many projects in the city, such as the addition of the old Rock Church, bringing reel-to-reel movies, donating his irrigation water to the city in hard times, and helping to provide the Lions Club treats from Santa to all the children. And whereas Quentin Nyson is an honored veteran by serving our country during World War II in the countries of England, Belgium, Germany, and France. And whereas as a successful business owner, Quentin Nyson conducted his business, the Nyson's Mercantile, from 1946 until the widening of Telegraph Road in 2011, providing jobs and merchandise to our community for over 65 years. And whereas the pianist for the Nyson Band, they have entertained audiences at annual city events of Cotton Days, Pioneer Days, and Independence Day, along with other weddings and even events for more than 60 years. And whereas after careful consideration, the City Council is determined to show their appreciation and respect to a citizen who has and continues to contribute so much to our community. Therefore, be it resolved that the gazebo in Veterans Park shall be named the Quentin A. Nyson Gazebo in honor of Quentin A. Nyson for the great many services he has given to the community. Passed and approved on this 27th day of July, 2016. Mayor Kenneth F. Nielsen.
Mayor, following your reading of the resolution, I'll make the motion that the council approve the resolution naming the Veterans Park gazebo in honor of Quentin A. Nyson.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Garth.
Granger, aye.
Seg Miller, aye.
Nice and I.
Turek, aye.
Bob, I'm glad you're here. Thanks. We are grateful to have the Nyson family in our midst and in our community. And we will have a plaque put up on that gazebo, and then we'll have a little ribbon cutting ceremony at a little future date. So, Bob, Garth, we're going to make, we'll make us a copy up, put it in a plaque for you, like a picture. So we'll give that to all your brothers and sisters. Any comments? Bob?
I think he's just over thrilled. He does deserve it. Like when I'm a little fella growing up, the household, that's all he would think about is that park and all the area over there. He put a lot of time in it. We helped develop it.
Yeah.
And especially that gazebo area, where he did a lot of, they did a lot of fundraising there, for different activities. And I think it's a very good thing.
Thank you. We think so too.
Doing it all.
Thank you. Garth, anything to say?
I feel like Bob. I think as well, he's, deserves it. And I know as growing up, it seemed like that was his main focus was to, promote the 4th, the 24th, and get the city involved and all the residents involved. And he just loves the town and always has and always will.
Thank you. Any other comments from?
Mayor, I'd just add as I know we have plans and maybe starting this year to do some renovations on Veterans Park, that this naming will persist through any renovation or any facelift that we provide to the gazebo.
Absolutely. I'm sure that as we upgrade our park, that it will still be the Quentin A. Nyson gazebo. So.
Yeah, appropriately, I appreciate you bringing that forward, Mayor, because I agree. This is well-deserved and well-earned and a legacy that will last forever.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can get that next generations of Nysons. I see that band starting to produce something. We can keep it rolling. So keep it going. We appreciate all that the whole family does. It is a great legacy in the community and something we always look forward to.
Yeah, thank you. And just remember, Bob, that I'll keep asking you when you get ready to play that one song. You need to learn that one song, and I'm not going to tell the audience what it is because it's going to be a surprise. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming, those that were here to support what we did here for Quentin. And we'll move on to item, excuse me, item 5, public hearings and related ordinances. Public hearing for the intent to consider declaring certain real property owned by the city to be surplus property, take steps to sale/exchange such property being considered for sale to the Hurricane Valley Fire District located on Coral Canyon Boulevard, approximately 66 North Coral Canyon Boulevard, Hurricane, Utah. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. It seems like after we got through that last piece of business, the rest is pretty irrelevant, pretty trivial considering what a great moment that was for the community. This is really step 2 of a process that I know you've all been involved in. As you remember, we had a piece of property there on Highland that it's being swapped out for this particular piece in anticipation for the time when we will be joining forces with the city of Hurricane to build a joint fire station there right on Coral Canyon Boulevard and State Road, kind of State Road 9 there, Coral Canyon Boulevard right there. So as required by our city code, in considering this a significant parcel, and that's defined as anything over $100,000 in value, we have to hold this public hearing. We actually publicized, since this is not being bid out, we didn't accept, of course, bids. This is being used for the purpose of, we are selling the property to the Hurricane Valley Fire District, and in exchange for the payment received, we'll use that to help also offset our equity position in the fire station. But it is a significant parcel. So within the notice, we ask individuals if they had any concerns, they could mail those in to myself. We've received none, but also we'll give this opportunity to have the public hearing as well. So that's the purpose there, Mayor, and I'll answer any questions.
Okay.
Obviously, the land could be our equity position, but we're not doing it that way.
The reason we're not doing it that way, and that's a good question, is because CIB, the Community Impact Board, who are the lenders of the money, need to have the real property in their hands. So they have to, instead of just taking the contribution, what they have to do is we were going to still get monetary value for it, but they need to make an exchange. It has to be an exchange by CIB rules. So it would have been probably easier for us just to swap it and say, here's this, but CIB required us to actually do a monetary transaction as part of their agreement on the loan. Does that answer your question?
I think so, because, okay.
So what we've done, but I did want to add this item too. So our parcel up on Highland is 1.27 acres. This is 1.47 acres, so slightly larger. We did have an appraisal done a year or so ago on this land up in Highland, and that's what we're using for the value there. And like I said, we would have just swapped it and said, okay, mark this up as a credit, but they needed the actual transaction, which they borrowed on. They had, in order to borrow, they have to disperse it.
But just to be clear, we are getting the credit for the exchange.
We are, and
Towards
just so you kind of know how that's structured a little bit, and I just found out today, under CIB, you're actually allowed to carry a note for 30 years, not just 20 years. Of course, this is not our note. This was done by the Hurricane Valley Fire District to the Community Impact Board. They did choose to do a 30-year note. And if you also remember, and I'm just giving you rough numbers, roughly the building is approximately $1.5 million, but 500,000 of that came from a grant from CIB, which means it doesn't need to be paid back, which is really kind of unusual considering we're not a mineral eligible county for most grant money through CIB. So basically, you've got $1 million investment in the building. Half of that will be ours. Pencil that over 30 years. It's about $26,000 a year, our commitment to that building. So really the good news about this is this joint operation, when you throw in the grant money, is, you know, we're building this building that will have significant impact upon the city, both in insurance ratings as well as our ability to respond. As you'll see later on in the evening, the mutual aid fits, or the automatic aid fits clearly within that continued process as well. But really, as you look at this building will be a significant part of Washington City's infrastructure, public safety infrastructure, really for a significant value, 40 cents on the dollar, basically.
Oh, does it mean we own half of the property and building when this?
Yes, we'll have an equity position in half. And the next step, the part 3 of this whole process, actually, the next step, which is, I guess, somewhat distinct, is we will be working. I know we've been working with Councilman Segmiller has been kind of assigned to this, and we haven't deeply got into this, but the next big significant piece of item that will come, public piece that will come to you, will be the arrangement for both recognition of the equity position in the building. There'll be 3 parts to it: equipment, operations. So that'll be a fairly kind of involved agreement, but very grateful for Hurricane and Hurricane Valley and all those. This is really significant. There's not, you find this up north, but I don't think we've ever done kind of a shared facility on this level before. So we're kind of excited and appreciate our partner on this.
I think it makes a lot of sense that we share like this with other governments, especially when we're so close to neighbors. It is true that we'll lose that site on Highland for any future fire station. But I think what we gain is, first of all, the new site will cover all of the service area that the old site had contemplated. But we'll probably get a station 5 or 10 years, maybe 15 years sooner than we would have ever built at the prior site. And so we'll cover all the service area and have that coverage much sooner this way than we would have had we just kept our old site and said we'll build there when it makes sense.
Any other questions, comments from the council? This is a public hearing. So it's open to any and all of you out there in the public that would be interested in adding any thoughts or ideas, comments. If not, then I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I see none, and we'll move to close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Turek, aye.
Nice night.
Seg Miller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Thank you. We'll move to item B, consideration to move forward on the sale of surplus property to the Hurricane Valley Fire District located Coral Canyon Boulevard at approximately 66 North Coral Canyon Boulevard, Hurricane, Utah 84737.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that the council approve sale of the surplus property located at 66 North Coral Canyon Boulevard to the Hurricane Valley Fire District.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Motion and a second.
Granger, aye.
Seg Miller, aye.
Nice night.
Turek, aye.
Thank you. That's approved.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
How do we set the value of the property?
We did an appraisal.
Okay.
Thank you. Item 6, Planning Commission appointments. Recommendation and consideration to appoint a member of the Planning Commission. As you all know and are aware, when I ask people to serve on the Planning Commission, I like them to serve 2 terms if they choose to. And the position that was up was Ben Martinson, and he did send an application to apply for another term. So I would like to recommend Ben Martinson to serve an additional term.
So Mayor, you're suggesting he be appointed to a second term?
Second term, yes.
I think Ben has done a good job. I think he's attended his meetings and tried to be involved, and I would definitely support his appointment.
Thank you.
Is that the form of a motion?
Is that a motion?
Mayor, I'll make the motion that the council appoint Ben Martinson to a second term on the Washington City Planning Commission.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Turek, aye.
Nice night.
Seg Miller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Thank you. I appreciate your support on that. Item 8, excuse me. A consideration to approve an automatic and mutual fire aid in emergency medical services interlocal agreement between Washington City, Hurricane Valley District, and Hilldale City. Chief Evans.
Well, good evening. Thanks for giving me a little bit of time. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this back before you. We had a good discussion last evening and hopefully answered a bunch of the questions. So just a quick review as far as automatic aid, mutual aid. There's always just a little bit of confusion between the two. We have a mutual aid agreement that goes across the county, and if somebody needs some help, we'll for sure help them. They help us back and forth. It's just not in an automatic piece. So if you need that help, you have to call and ask, and then they send it. And really, the difference is really right from the start in in that mutual aid setting. And for the most part, we're talking about structured fires. In that mutual aid setting, we're going to get dispatched out, or they're going to get dispatched out, and then they're going to quickly decide that they need help, of course, and then they would call and ask, and then those units would then be sent, which always happens. In my time here, nobody's ever said no. They always go. It's just that 3 to 4 minutes that you always lose, and that's really what we're trying to gain in an automatic aid agreement, to get that just right off the bat. This has not been an easy process. It's something that was being worked on long before I started here a number of years ago, and so we are super excited to get some players to the table and get this kicked off. And as City Manager Mr. Carter had mentioned, it really does go right in line with the whole transition as far as the station and sharing that and just coming together to share some resources in a good give and take relationship where we help our neighbors and they help us.
We may not be able to appreciate directly to Hurricane, but I hope that you'll express to them how delighted we are that they would want to cooperate with us and make this happen.
Absolutely. I'm share that for sure. Thanks.
Has Hilldale and Hurricane passed their agreement yet?
I'm not sure where it is signed. I believe Hilldale has signed it. And I know Hurricane, they talked about it going before the board last week. He'd met with everybody on the board and it seemed like they just needed to get it at an official meeting that they were prepared to sign it. So we haven't heard of any hiccups or any concerns whatsoever from either of the two organizations.
Chief, I have one question for you and then maybe one for Council Starkey. For you, does this automatic aid commitment, does it have a budgetary impact? Are there going to be more expenses or more fuel costs or more equipment costs because of this than we have currently planned for?
There's a possibility to have a small, really in the soft costs like you talk about, as far as some fuel costs, things of that nature. The reality of it is, for the most part, these are calls that we would probably end up going to anyway, or they would end up coming to. It's just a matter of now we're going to cut out that 2 or 3 minute delay. And so, there could be some small costs, but definitely no hard costs or no really, as far as any budgetary increases.
So as a response, I guess, to a community member that's concerned about the costs, would your position be that we recover those costs by having additional services that would be responding to our citizens when they need them?
Absolutely. And that's what we always want to make sure that that works well in any kind of an agreement that we set up, that it's a give and a take, and that it's positive for both organizations, for both communities. And not only do we respond to help them, but there's obviously that give back as far as them coming this direction. And so absolutely, it goes both ways.
Good.
We did talk about, when you talk about cost sharing too, that the insurance rating system things with regards to ISO gives us our insurance rating that we all get to pay whatever they rate us at is what determines what our fire insurance rating is. That response, when it's an automatic aid from Hurricane to the city, their apparatus and those people that come now count the same as ours. And so that's a positive impact on our rating, which in turn has an effect on the community as a whole and keeping our rating down or even lowering it.
Well, I think we've been doing mutual aid for years because it makes sense, and I certainly agree with making it a matter of contract liability as well. Uncle Starkey, the first whereas paragraph references the Interlocal Cooperation Act. Is this an interlocal?
Yes,
Are we creating an interlocal by doing this?
it does.
Okay.
And that's just the format for which the state is set up for any time you have more than one governmental agency which joins together for a mutual purpose. What it tries to do is then tries to take some of the liabilities away when you shift over to those things. For a lot of different reasons, it helps. It makes it so it's standardized in how you proceed with the management of it, those types of things. Yeah.
The operating board of the interlocal will then comprise of 3 fire chiefs. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. And that's a good question, because right now this council can choose otherwise, but we didn't want to really encumber this with a large amount of governance issues. So right now it is written on section 15 that it's the fire chiefs that will comprise of the board. And where their check is really is the budgetary side, budgetary issues and other things, and the withdrawal. You can see it's a very, very liberal withdrawal issue. It's 30 days notice. But I'm supportive of keeping the governance board of just the chiefs at this moment, if there needs to be a higher level of governance.
So maybe I'll clarify. 15 states that it's not creating an interlocal entity.
15?
Yeah. And so I guess my question is really, if it were an interlocal entity, I think there does need to be some form of a representative board. 15's first sentence makes it clear that there's not an interlocal entity. Anyway, I guess we'll
look at that. That's a
just
good
make
question.
sure
So
that
that's section 203 of the code. So we'll have to see.
By the first few paragraphs, it almost sounds like we are creating an interlocal. And then paragraph 4 kind of describes the board. And then 15 kind of,
I suspect
Suggest
it
that
was a
it's-
typo, and Chief had used as a kind of a standard of this, one that South, was it South Salt Lake?
So this is really out of Salt Lake Valley.
Yeah.
So this is the same, well, there's a few modifications, but for the most part, this is an agreement that's been in place for all, I think there's 11 agencies in the Salt Lake Valley. Everybody in Salt Lake County is under this.
I think it does.
Agreement.
I think that's a
If you'll- if you'll
15,
review
I think
that.
it does create an interlocal agency, but I think they may have meant this to write what creates no separate governmental entity. I'm not sure what they really meant there, but we'll look at it and adjust as we need to, because probably a catch that the other cities out of it also.
okay, they may need more attorneys on their city council.
Well, and I appreciate it. I did ask Councilman Segmiller also that he has been involved in this discussion before to review this today as well.
Roger called and asked me to read over it, so I did a little reading.
Any other questions for the chief?
Chief, I apologize if I wasn't here last night to the discussion. Part of what it talks about here is our medical services. What effect does that have with our current Gold Cross and Hurricane City in the medical services?
It really doesn't affect anything as far as the situation,
Okay.
what we have set up. And when it comes to the automatic aid, the way that it'll be handled at dispatch is by every nature code, we'll set up the staff.
Okay.
And so it'll, for each nature code, we'll decide what that is. So a structure fire, we'll ask for 2 engines and a truck to respond to that, and it'll just automatically send those over. Like I said, now in that mutual aid, it really is just paging just our organization.
Correct.
And then all our people come together and jump
Then
in
make those
things and go.
decisions of, okay, we're going to need something other than what we've got here.
Yeah.
So, like
Absolutely.
you say, I agree with what we've done here. I think it's a great thing to speed up and for both communities and entities there. I just didn't know what was happening with the medical services by the heading there. I apologize I wasn't here last
No.
night for that discussion. So.
Well, no problem. And actually, I don't think we talked about EMS. We did. It could have an effect on some of those nature codes if you take, because there's even a nature code for a bus accident. And so we would obviously set, right now, you would just get the same thing you would get, which would just be the fire engine and ambulance. But if you think about a bus accident, we should probably increase that.
Certainly.
And so we could do that in this process now by increasing our stacks to be able to set
By
them
the
into
code
that
of it.
system. And so it'll address that. But for the most part, it really, this will impact structure fires.
Great.
Okay, thank you. If no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that council approve an automatic and mutual aid fire and emergency medical services interlocal agreement between Washington City, Hurricane Valley Fire District, and Hilldale City, subject only to legal counsel's review of some of the wording that was questioned in this hearing.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. I've got a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice night.
Segmiller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Thank you. That's approved. Thank you, Chief. Item 9, bonds. Consideration for adopting of a resolution of the City Council of Washington City, Utah, authorizing the issuance and sale of not more than 111 million aggregate principal amount of water revenue refunding bonds, Series 2016, and related matters. City Manager.
I thought for the benefit of the scouts, we ought to read these bond documents this evening, because you really ought to earn this merit badge. I do want to introduce Bruce Williams, who's with us tonight. He's the man in the tie out there, so he's important. He's with Zions Bank. Zions Bank is our finance advisors, and we don't know where we'd be without them. They do a fantastic job. And actually, if you have any questions, I would actually let Bruce answer those, but these are the parameter resolutions, this and the subsequent next item on the agenda. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, there is an opportunity because of interest rates for us to refund a series, a fairly extensive series of bonds involving at this point, and then later on Coral Canyon, but at this point, the water revenue. That's why Mike felt like he deserved a box of chocolates down there, because they're his bonds.
Did you get one? Oh, okay.
Good.
Now, these, of course, don't really change But what the parameters resolution now will do is the council will authorize this to be posted and to have a public hearing associated with this, with parameters established on what the conditions need to be met before, in this case, the mayor is authorized to execute those bonds. Bruce, maybe anything I'm missing here, or council, if you have any questions on this. Some of you have lived through these before. We are looking at some substantial, and we want to be careful always saying what the savings is, because we don't know that until we hammer the deal home. But it is substantial, and at the end of the day, it just saves the taxpayers a significant amount of money. So Bruce, do you want to speak?
For the record, I'm Bruce Williams from Zions Public Finance. We did identify a couple of opportunities. The first one being the city's water revenue bonds, and there's quite a few of them outstanding right now. And so it would take all of those, refund them or refinance them, and put them basically into one package as a series of bonds. We are in probably one of the lowest interest rate environments that we've seen. I looked at a graph we put together in the last 20 years. We're about in the lowest 98th percentile of what we've seen in the last 20 years. And part of that is because of Great Britain and their going out of the EU, that lowered rates. But also, as you probably saw today, the Fed did not raise rates again. But we're in a very low interest rate environment. So there are some great opportunities for you as a city and as a council to save some money on those, because many of them were issued at a time where rates were significantly higher, as much as 5.5%, 6% types of time frame. And so we'd roll those all together and have some savings. We anticipate that this would probably close on the water revenue bonds about the 1st of October. We would probably be pricing them in September. It takes a while to go through the process of getting there, but we anticipate rates are going to stay down for at least that period of time. And so that's why we recommended to Roger that it's probably a good time to look at that as an interest rate environment. And then while I'm up, I'll just talk about the other issue as well. The things that as a parameters resolution, you'll see in there's some parameters, $11 million for the Washington City water revenue bonds. We're actually probably going to issue somewhere closer to 10, but we always try and push that up just a little bit so that there's wiggle room if something were to happen. We put a 5.5% maximum coupon, and if you understand bonds, as they're usually issued in a series where you start out with a lower interest rate and every year it ratchets up. So we set one that's high enough to deal with what we anticipate to be the highest interest rate on any of the series that's there, and we're suggesting 5.5%. It's a maximum of 31 years. The current bonds are 30 years, so we just gave, again, a little flexibility, and that they could be sold at a maximum of a 2% discount to the underwriter. So those are just kind of standard parameters within which, as Roger mentioned earlier, the mayor as the person who has delegated the authority to, once the underwriters look at it and establish the interest rates on it, can say, yes, this is okay. You would be delegating authority to him to do that. On the Coral Canyon side of things, we've got $8 million there as parameters. It actually probably is going to be slightly over $7 million. Those are general obligation bonds. Again, a 5.5% coupon, 15 years. They'll probably be more like 14 years. We wouldn't be pushing out the timeline on it. And so that's a maximum of 2%. So those are the things that are there. Are there any questions you've got for me concerning interest rate environment, what we'd be doing? As I mentioned before, we probably on the Coral Canyon be closing toward the end of September timeline, and the Washington City water revenue bonds somewhere during the first 2 weeks of October.
You say that we're currently in a 30-year bond, but how far into that 30 years are we?
Well, there's all these different pieces that we're putting together, and when you combine them together, the longest that's still outstanding is 30 years.
The longest.
Yeah, so we would be putting the debt service schedule such that it would stay about the same, but you'd be actually saving each year because you'd be paying less interest. And so the amount you'd pay in interest and principal on those bonds, if you compare that with what you're currently paying, there'd be debt service savings every year during that period of time. That the city
What's the highest that we're currently paying in interest?
in interest, if I remember right, it was about 6%, 5.5%, 6%. But again, that was over the entire issue. So there is significant savings, as Mr. Carter mentioned earlier, if as long as we can tie in interest rates that are similar to what we have today.
Is there any obvious advantage to us to reinvest the savings back into principal and shorten the length of time that we're paying off these
That is an
bonds?
option that you can look at, is to instead of actually reducing the amount that you're paying out on debt, to shorten the time frame. That's a decision that you as a city would need to look at and see what makes the most sense for you. But at this point, we're anticipating structuring it very similar to the existing debt.
Some of these early long bonds were USDA bonds early on. Some of you have been around with this for a long time. Remember, that was probably the only one that wanted to come in and give us any money to put in water lines.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's why they were such late.
This is when we redid all the downtown water lines 8 or 9 years ago. whenever
Yeah,
it
and some of
was.
the USDA stuff goes out as many as 40 years. They'll
If
borrow
we
for
reinvested the money into paying down principal, for example, how long do you think it would take us to pay off these bonds? as
You know,
opposed
I
to 30
haven't
years?
looked at that, but we could look into that for you and give you that information. The other thing that you might want to look at is the savings that you have. You may want to reinvest into your system as well. Many cities do that so that they have some additional money without having to go out and issue additional debt to reinvest into the system to keep those upgraded. So those are decisions that you as a city need to look at with your public works director and with your city manager. But we can look at various scenarios on that.
One of the questions I always have on bond refinancing is our rate and our fee structure is built based on our bonds and the cost of repaying these bonds. And when we accomplish a refinance, technically we now have a water rate or a whatever rate that was built on the prior bond cost, not on the new bond cost. And so another option, Councilwoman Granger, could just be looking at our water rates, or looking at the Coral Canyon one's an easy one to look at because it's very, very localized. You could look at the rates that are being charged and consider that as well. I'm not suggesting that's the answer, but it always is part of the equation.
But we have a situation right now where the water district is raising our rates as of what, July? And we haven't talked about whether we're going to raise rates here, and we don't have anything in front of us.
Coming to you next.
I recall discussing it.
Yeah,
We haven't resolved anything though.
No, what's happening, and that is coming to you next, Councilman, because we've actually been looking at, as I mentioned to you before, the restructure of the utility bill. So we've separate out the Washington City water portion charge and the Water Conservancy District charge. That's taken a little work and some bright minds to get through that, and we just finished that just recently, so it is scheduled to come before you next council.
I wonder if we want to look at
Think
these
about
two
that.
things together, and it would be an unusual thing for us.
The
to
one thing
reduce
that's
anything, but-
the one thing that's a little different on the Coral Canyon is those are general obligation bonds, meaning that you, as a council, set a rate, a tax rate that would pay those off. If the debt service goes down on that, it potentially would require you to reduce that rate to a level so that you're just paying off the.
Yeah, now the Coral Canyon, and Bruce may be familiar with this or not, but I explained it to you before. The great thing about the refunding on the Coral Canyon piece is, if you remember when we refunded before, we front-loaded the interest savings. We did that because we had lost the step-up provision, the sale from Suncor to State Institutional Trust Land. And as you remember, that was at a time when the economy was down, housing values were down, the whole bit, and we were capped at the amount of certified tax rate. So even though the housing value was going down, normally that would balance off with the certified tax rate going up, but we were capped. So We front-loaded that interest rate to avoid a property tax increase, but what that did do is it increases the payments a little later on in the Coral Canyon. What we have asked in this situation is with this refunding, we go back to levelizing those obligations there. And then that also starts to get us into a position where we don't run into trouble with the state. As you know, the state has come back and said, well, your payments have to match your certified tax rate. But of course, we have to indicate to them that since we're kind of capped there, we have to anticipate the time when we can't exceed that cap and have revenues aside. They've at this point allowed us to have that option. But what we do anticipate is once we levelize those debt service rates back down, there is actually an opportunity, depending on how things go in the future, that we will be able to lower that 0.0003 certified tax rate out at Coral Canyon to reflect the actual. So this worked out very well. We couldn't have predicted this to work out any better than it did on Coral Canyon.
So like prior refinances, you're going to come back and substantially blow the parameters out of the water, aren't you?
Definitely. The parameters are very high. And they're established high for a reason to give the flexibility. But yeah, it'll be significantly less than that. If we were at the 5.5% across the board, there'd be no reason for you to do the refunding.
So I was going to mention that one of the things that we often look at when we refinance is if we can get kind of a 3% or greater savings on a refinance. I think with the water bonds particularly, we're up around 15 or 16%, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. It was
Savings?
Savings.
Wow.
Yes, it's very significant.
It is very significant.
Is the setup fee, is it based on the amount you loan?
When you say the setup fee, the costs
Of the new contract?
of the issuance, basically you have several professionals that will be working with you on that, being bond counsel that puts together the resolutions, ourselves as your financial advisor, and a few others. The financial advisory fee is contingent upon the size of it, but that's, as we quoted what we think the savings will be, including the, as much as 17%, all of that is rolled into it as well. So it's not on top of that.
Yeah, so we kind of look at a true interest rate,
That's right.
which is an all-inclusive interest rate of all those.
All the costs associated with going through the refinancing as well. And Zions would not be providing the financing itself. We're your financial advisor and would be assisting to select another company that would be your underwriter and would actually be giving you the rates. And then we are your fiduciary to look at those rates and say, yeah, those are market rates, or try and work with them to ensure that the rates are online with market conditions.
What are we currently paying a year in interest on those?
Oh, there's a whole lot of them. We'd have to probably.
You don't know what that total
not
is?
off the top of my head. So each of them have their own kind of series, their own payments.
And a different interest rate.
And a different interest rate. So that's what they've been kind of crunching all that to see. And what Councilman Segmiller is correct. How we had initially anticipated, how we typically approach these things is when the savings occurs, then that just reduces the budgetary requirement of those obligations, and thereby you see the budgetary requirements going down. And so then when we look at rates and other things, it's all based upon that. But yeah, we can look at it a couple of ways, but.
If we get a chance, I'd like to know that amount, just interest.
Been here long enough that I finally understand how that all connects. Only took 7 years.
Yeah, you did pretty good.
Is there any other questions I could answer? I appreciate the opportunity
thank
to
you,
be
Bruce.
here with you tonight.
Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor, I want to compliment Roger, and I know that he's always got a good eye for financial opportunities, and he's kind of led the lead on this a number of times, and this is another good opportunity where just being aware of the opportunity and then finding the appropriate, advisors to help us creates a substantial efficiency just by being aware of market conditions and taking advantage of them.
Thank you.
Great.
I think that Roger comes by that because he sits on our investment committee, and we've seen what happened to our bonds and our investments there. So
This has the inverse problem with our investment. However, I will still tell you, we're still above the public treasury investment fund. So as long as we're above that, we're still okay.
All right, thank you. If there's no other questions, I'm not going to go back into B and have us consider it because we've already talked about it. So I'll entertain a motion to for adoption of both A or B.
For some reason, mine shot wandering to the podium.
The interest that we're paying out is 438,376.
Thank you.
Are these all on these series that we're talking about?
Well, that's just, all I have is our total interest payments on bonds.
So we don't verify that that's on all these.
So Mayor, I'll go ahead and make the motion. Council approve a resolution of the city authorizing the issuance of not more than $11 million in aggregate principal amount of water revenue refunding bonds, Series 2016. And that the council also approve a resolution as the governing board of the Coral Canyon Special Service District authorizing the issuance and sale by the district of not more than $8 million in aggregate principal amount of general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2016.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Seg Miller, aye.
Granger, aye.
All right.
Are we okay, Bruce, to do an by motion, or do we need to have a
So I really would suggest.
Are we doing on both? Okay.
We
Well-
actually had the discussion of whether it had to be in the governing body of the Coral Canyon Special Service District. We concluded that that was not the case. We probably ought to have them separate.
Okay.
Okay.
Council, will you just
I'll
restate
redo
that,
this.
please?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that the council adopt a resolution of Washington City authorizing the issuance of and sale of not more than 11 million aggregate principal amount of water revenue refunding bonds, Series 2016.
I'll second that one again.
Motion and a second.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Seg Miller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to B.
Then Mayor, I'll make the motion that the council adopt a resolution of Washington City the council acting as the governing board of the Coral Canyon Special Service District, authorizing the issuance and sale by the district of not more than $8 million in aggregate principal amount of its general obligation refunding bonds, Series 2016.
Somebody else want to second that one?
I'll second that one.
Thank you.
Turek, aye.
Nice and I.
Seg Miller, aye.
Granger, aye.
Okay, thank you. Those are adopted. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Bruce.
Mayor, I'd just like to comment for a minute.
Absolutely.
I have a rather financially conservative bent, and I don't like paying interest. Okay? My cars, I save the money before I buy them, and my house is paid for in less than 10 years, okay? Given that, I know that the reason we bond, whether we're here or at the school district, is because we cannot accrue enough surplus to pay with principal. I just like to suggest that we think about working with our legislators to see if we can introduce another way of thinking so they're not paying $500,000 a year in interest. If we're able to accrue the money in advance and then do what it is we need to do, we would be saving considerable funds. But I realize that would take some legislative action to bring it about. But I wish we did it differently because we spend a lot of money bonding, as do all the public entities that I know of. But somehow inherently in my psyche, that seems wrong.
The only negative to your suggestion is those people with a lot of money that want to buy municipal bonds would have less investment opportunities if the municipality started.
What I've noticed
Not
over the
issuing
years,
bonds.
however, is the ones that make money off of bonds tend to be New York-based money markets.
Yeah.
And it's not accruing to Utah, not much anyway.
I think it's a good idea. The only other thing, we often use debt also, just so you know, and so the public knows, as a method of equity allocation. So what I mean by that is when we build a building that has a 30-year lifespan, for instance, and we marry up those bonds during that period, all those people who get the benefit of that facility help carry part of that versus a smaller subsection. I only say that because it is a little bit counterintuitive to what we would do in our home financing. And so it is an equity tool, but I do like Councilwoman's idea. We always want the legislature to kind of loosen up on us a little bit on some of those things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Appreciate the comment,
Thank you.
Councilwoman. Okay, we'll move on to report. Anything to report from your assigned committees?
Yes, in the planning, Denise helped me acquire these from the Utah League of Cities and Towns. It's called the Utah Business Friendly Cities Starter Kit. And as we do our planning and we talk a lot economically about helping businesses in our community, I have to say that I have not yet read it. But I think it should be part of our dialogue and planning about how we can, perhaps there may be suggestions in here that are helpful. So appreciate your help with that, Denise.
I was gonna say, I think it was, wasn't too many years ago, we actually were a recipient of being one of the
Right, exactly right.
business-friendly
Friendly
cities.
cities.
So we've actually been a part of that in the past and received some recognition for being a part of that. So, but let's just keep it going.
You notice we're listed on the back as one of the cities that's received the governor's recognition.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else on that, Councilwoman? Deb? We move on to city manager report. Before we do that, any of you plan on attending the League of Cities and Towns convention? Have you gotten with Denise?
Have I gotten
I
with
think
you?
so.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We invite you to go if you can. Okay, city manager report.
Actually, Mayor, I just have a couple of dates I want you to be aware of, and then we'll get more. One, of course, is the UAMPS member conference in August. That's August 15th and 16th in Heber. And if you have the opportunity, Jessica, well, you can get with me. Jessica will follow up with you as well. It's a great conference, a lot of nice breakout sessions. I think Councilman Turek, you've been with us in times past.
I've gone.
Mayor's been with us.
Logan.
Probably time that I went to one of those.
Yeah, it is.
It really is very informative. The other one I want to point out, and I'm going to give you copies of this, I don't have them with me now, but I'll put them in your box, is at our request, and I mean that Washington City was one of the significant ones that requested this, on September 12th and 13th at the Hilton in Salt Lake City. Now, this is near the time of your Utah League of Cities and Towns. As a matter of fact, it corresponds somewhere in there, but I don't know exactly where. We are having, there is a day-long conference on the carbon-free power project. This is our small modular nuclear reactors. We had asked for them to bring this here so that our policymakers would have an opportunity to really get to understand this technology, what's going into the process of getting it licensed and certified. I will indicate that we have now narrowed down the two. We started with six potential sites, and through the process established by the Department of Energy, those are now narrowed down to 2 sites. Those 2 sites now have to go through what's called a site qualification process, which is when we start getting into the nuts and bolts of seismic issues, groundwater, archaeological issues, essentially almost like a big environmental review. Just so you know, the 2 sites that have been narrowed down, both of them are on the Idaho National Laboratory facility. And again, what's so nice about these small modular nuclears is this particular facility that is being worked on right now has a total footprint of only 40 acres. Now, I say that, and somebody may say, well, 40 acres seems like a large size, but not when you compare it to these large nuclear sites that currently exist. So it sits very well in the vast acreage that Idaho National Laboratory has. They're very excited about the opportunity up there because they're pretty pro-nuclear up in that area. They're pretty excited about this project. But September 12th and 13th, we'll take care of accommodations. I will copy you on both the invitation as well as the program. But that would be a fantastic. Dr. Reyes, who's the gentleman at Oregon State University that has developed this technology, will be there as well. And if for no other reason, he's a very fascinating man to visit with regards to this nuclear technology. So I want to tell you about those, and I'll put those in your box. And Mayor, I really don't have anything else other. We talked about Telegraph last night. I'm going to send out an update to all those who were not here.
I saw the drilling rigs out there
Yeah,
today.
they're doing the inclinometers, and so I'll send out an update. I was hoping to get that today, and I didn't. I'll get that out tomorrow. So other than questions, Mayor, I don't think I have anything else really burning.
Any questions for Roger? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion, we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second. Miller, aye.
Turek, aye.
We're adjourning, Garth. I'm sure you're going to say aye to that, aren't you? Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening.